Good morning, everyone. The session is open. First of all, I would like to ask if the minutes of the sessions held on April 13th, 15th, and 16th, 2026 can be approved. These minutes have previously been made available to the members of the committee, so if the committee agrees, they can be approved by assent. Perfect. Then we will begin with the appearance of the former CEO of Globalia and Air Europa, Mr. Francisco Javier Hidalgo Gutierrez, to provide information regarding the subject of the committee's inquiry. Mr. Javier Hidalgo Gutierrez appears before this investigative committee created by virtue of the full Senate's resolution adopted on January 15, 2026. The purpose of this committee is to investigate and, if applicable, determine the existence of political responsibilities arising from the actions carried out by the State Industrial Holdings Company, SEPI, from May 2018 to the present, with particular attention to the processes for granting aid, subsidies, public participation, business bailouts, and other financial support, managed directly or indirectly by that entity. Your appearance, excuse me, Senator, I kindly ask for some silence, please. Her appearance takes place in compliance with the Commission's work plan and in accordance with the provisions of the Organic Law 5 of 1984 of May 24th regarding appearances before the investigation committees of the Congress and the Senate or of both chambers. In accordance with that law and under the terms of the summons that was notified to her, this commission has required her appearance to inform it in relation to the subject matter of the parliamentary investigation. The person appearing is subject to the obligation derived from Article 502.3 of the Penal Code not to fail to tell the truth in her testimony. All of this is without prejudice to the constitutional rights of the person appearing. Likewise, she has been informed, by virtue of what is established in that law, of the possibility of appearing accompanied by a person who may assist her. As for the development of the appearance, which is public in nature according to the provisions of Articles 75.1 and 190 of the Senate regulations, the person appearing will answer the questions posed by the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups. We will now begin with the statements from the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups for a period of 50 minutes. And on behalf of the proposing group, the Popular Parliamentary Group, Mr. Miranda de Lara has the floor. Please go ahead, Mr. Miranda.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, Mr. Hidalgo. Welcome to the Senate. Welcome to this investigative committee, whose sole purpose is to find out the truth about whether there were political responsibility in this case, in the bailout of Air Europa, and in the corruption schemes investigated by the courts that could be linked to this bailout. This group respects, as it should be, your presumption of innocence. We know that you are not charged in any case, but you have a lot to say, because the bailout of your company was the fastest, it was the largest. And it could be, along with Plus Ultra, one of the most opaque, because there were also intermediaries involved who are being investigated or who are in prison or have been. And because the number 2 at SEPI, who also signed your file, is currently being investigated in Court of Instruction number 49 investigated for alleged misconduct, malfeasance. Although today, as I have been told, he has decided not to testify. I don't know if that's the case. Is that so? Yes. I understand that he did testify earlier.
I'd like to hear the question you asked me. Can you hear me now? In my previous appearance before the Senate, I already stated everything related to this matter. And last Tuesday, I answered all the questions regarding this same issue that were put to me in the Supreme Court, also by the private prosecution, which includes your lawyers. For all other matters, I will exercise my right not to testify and won't answer your questions.
Well, as you have just informed us, Mr. Hidalgo, you are exercising your right not to testify. But as I was saying, I am aware that indeed, as you just pointed out, you testified just 2 days ago, recently, in the Supreme Court. But you also did so as a witness on September 12, 2024, before the National Court, also as a witness. And as a witness, I imagine you were sworn in. I imagine that's how it was. And what? Also, did they remind you not to commit the alleged crime of perjury as defined in Article 458 of the Criminal Code? Let's see exactly what he said that day at the National Court.
Which Ministry of Transport official spoke with Globalia? To my knowledge, with none.
He didn't communicate with any official from the Ministry of Transport. His lawyer also insisted, and he answered the following.
And not with the then Minister of Transport either. You didn't have any meeting or encounter, not even around those dates in 2019? No further questions.
So he also answered no to his lawyer while under oath at the National Court at that time. However, as you have rightly said, just 2 days ago, after appearing, Mr. Abalos' lawyer, and admitting that you did have meetings with Mr. Abalos and encounters with Mr. Coldo, you stated the following before the Supreme Court, also under oath.
Do you remember under what circumstances you met Mr. Coldo Garcia de Izaguirre?
Well, it was when I went to see Minister Abalos for the first time.
And how often did you have conversations with my client Coldo Garcia Izaguirre? I mean in the years 2020 and 2021.
Well, he would always see me before the meetings with Minister Abalos. Maybe I could talk for 5 minutes.
Mr. Hidalgo, under oath you said you did not meet and have not met with either Coldo or Abalos at the National Court. And also under oath you said that you did meet, you changed your story at the Supreme Court just 2 days ago. Mr. Hidalgo, either you lied under oath at the National Court or you lied under oath at the Supreme Court as well. In both cases, you could have committed an alleged crime of perjury. It is defined in Article 458 of the Penal Code. Madam President, I would like it to be recorded in the minutes at this moment for the conclusions of this committee that in this session we have uncovered and heard an alleged crime that Mr. Hidalgo could have committed, lying before a court of law while under oath. He did it at a time, September 24, when Air Europa had not yet returned the bailout. He allegedly lied with the Spaniards' money still on the company's balance sheet. He allegedly lied with the bailout still in effect and lied before the judicial body that was and is investigating the scheme. Mr. Hidalgo, it seems that today you don't have any answers, but you sure had plenty to say when you were asking the Spaniards to give you $475 million for your job. And today, how can you stay silent now that the representatives of those same Spaniards who paid for your bailout are, on behalf of the Spaniards, asking you for explanations? Let's start, honorable members, from the beginning. You also said before the National Court, and I quote, that Mr. Victor de Aldama was hired to mediate a debt you had with Venezuela. Is that correct? That's what he said, and we take that to mean that, in that case, he may have told the truth. How much was that debt? You also explained that it was $200 million later. Investigations found out it was $205 million. When did you sign the 2 contracts you had with Aldama? I'll tell you since you aren't saying it. On September 17, 2019, a debt mediation contract with Venezuela. And on November 1, 2019, a contract as a general consultant for 12,100 euros per month. Coincidentally, right after meeting Begoña Gomez in St. Petersburg. Mr. Hidalgo, did you meet Mrs. Begoña Gomez in St. Petersburg? Could you confirm that you hired Mr. Victor de Aldama? Right after that, a month and a half later in one case, and 15 days later in the other case, because there were 2 contracts after meeting the wife of the Prime Minister in St. Petersburg. And I ask you, why did Globalia need an external general consultant if it already had executives? Was it because they needed a fixer? A fixer for what? A fixer for a bailout? According to the investigating judge, in the order dated October 23, 2024, as has been published, I'll read it literally, there are numerous payments from Globalia Corporación Empresarial in Aldama's accounts. Are you referring, Mr. Hidalgo, to these amounts of 12,100 euros per month that were being paid to MTM 180 Capital SL, which was Aldama's company? Or perhaps also to the contracts. The 1.5 million that, according to what has been published, Aldama is claiming or was claiming from you in exchange or as compensation for other services. Perhaps you could clarify this for us, Mr. Hidalgo. If at any point you would like to intervene, just ask, and we will be happy to listen to you. Was it 4.5 million for securing the bailout, or perhaps it was 4.5 million for resolving the debt issue with Venezuela? And by the way, Mr. Hidalgo, before Aldama, let me ask you, before having Victor de Aldama as the intermediary for the Venezuelan debt, did you hire anyone else? Did you perhaps have Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero under contract as the intermediary for the debt that Venezuela owed you? And why did you change him? And I'll take this opportunity to ask you, since last Tuesday, when Mr. Choclan, who is actually Aldama's lawyer, asked you questions, you answered the same question, whether you had Mr. Zapatero on your payroll or had him under contract, that he didn't cost you anything. Do you still maintain that, to your knowledge, you never had Mr. Rodriguez Zapatero under contract to recover the debt that the Maduro regime owed you? I'll tell you because Mr. Zapatero, who appeared here on March 2nd, stated, and I'll read it literally, Mr. Hidalgo asked me if I could see Maduro because Venezuela had a debt with Iberia. Mr. Hidalgo, did you ask Zapatero to see Maduro? Yes or no? Did you actually visit Nicolas Maduro, the dictator of Venezuela? Yes or no? Did Mr. Rodriguez Zapatero accompany you on that visit with Nicolas Maduro as a fixer? Yes or no? And since you had him hired, I ask you, did you pay him for that work? And how much did you pay him? Did Mr. Rodriguez Zapatero invoice his services as a fixer with the Maduro regime for the benefit of your company? Did you pay him for the arrangement? And did he do it as a freelancer? These may seem like trivial questions, but they make perfect sense, since Mr. Rodriguez Zapatero also appears to be involved in another bailout. As you can see, in this case, we have the same people, the same types of bailouts, the same fixers, and the same unknowns. Let's talk about Begoña Gomez, a key figure in the bailout, which was the Aldama contract, and also another essential piece for another contract that you had, precisely, with what Begoña Gomez was in charge of. Let's go back to St. Petersburg. The General Assembly of the World Tourism Organization, or UN Tourism as it's called now, was held there. Let me ask you, who did you travel with to St. Petersburg, Mr. Hidalgo? According to what Ms. Leticia Laufer stated in this very room a year and a half ago, you traveled on a private flight, on a private plane, with Mr. Victor de Aldama. Is that correct? Is that correct? Do you know how Ms. Begoña Gomez traveled? Did she travel with you? Did you pay for Begoña Gomez's ticket to travel to the World Tourism Organization Assembly in St. Petersburg? Yes or no? According to what Ms. Laufer stated, right here in this room, the two of them flew together on a commercial flight. Mr. Hidalgo, there, according to what Ms. Laufer acknowledged, and as has been published, that's where Begoña Gomez and you met. Can you tell us exactly where you met? No. Where? According to your international director, who also appeared in this room, Mr. Lisandro Menu, he stated here that at the end of the dinner, and I quote literally, he introduced Begoña Gomez to me as a collaborator. And a few minutes later, we went to the hotel where we talked, and I was able to introduce Mr. Menu, Leticia Laufer, and also you, Mr. Javier Hidalgo. Do you confirm this? Was it Lisandro Menu who introduced you to Begoña Gomez at the hotel in St. Petersburg? And after you met, what happened? According to Mr. Aldama, and I quote, according to Mr. Aldama, there was a moment when she, Begoña Gomez, sent her bodyguards to the room and stayed with us, with you, and with him. We were enjoying a drink. Mr. Hidalgo, did Begoña Gomez send her bodyguards to the room? Can you confirm that? Let me ask you another way. Did you, Mr. Hidalgo, meet with the wife of the Prime Minister alone with a broker who turned out to be the corrupt link in all the schemes that are being investigated in the early morning hours and in a hotel room in St. Petersburg? Yes or no? It's a very simple answer that you could clarify for us right now. Were you alone with a middleman who ended up being the corrupt link in a room with the wife of the Prime Minister of Spa in a hotel in St. Petersburg? Yes or no? Mr. Hidalgo, the day before yesterday you stated verbatim in the Supreme Court, I don't know what's being said about the night in St. Petersburg. Curious, Mr. Hidalgo. You don't know what's being said, but nevertheless, you didn't deny it in the Supreme Court, nor have you denied it here today. What we do know is that 4 months after the night in St. Petersburg, your innovation subsidiary, Guacalua Innovation Hub, signed a sponsorship agreement with the IE for 40,000 euros. 40,000 euros a year for the IE Africa Center, which was, what a coincidence, directed by Miss Begoña Gomez, who likes to be in charge. Educational institutions. The perfect platform to turn Leticia Laufer into Begoña Gomez's best friend, at least until the bailout was finalized. Because that's what Mrs. Laufer told us in this room. Mrs. Laufer, an executive at Guacalua, whom you hired, who was also a founder of Guacalua. Precisely in this room, what she told us was that she had a very close relationship and sponsorship during 2020 with Begoña Gomez during the rescue negotiations. But when the rescue was over, what a coincidence, they no longer had that relationship or that sponsorship. And a year later, or 2 years later, Guacalua ended up without any activity and was dissolved. Mr. Hidalgo, maybe you can clarify something for us. I could be wrong, and I would like you to clarify it for us. I ask you, did you create Guacalua with the sole purpose of sponsoring Begoña Gomez's activities? Did Guacalua have any other clients? Did you get rid of Guacalua once the rescue had been achieved? Or were you prudent enough to wait another year? Is Guacalua still part of the Globalia group? And how much did you pay Mrs. Leticia Laufer for the services rendered? According to some media outlets, Mrs. Leticia Laufer received 2.4 million euros channeled from Globalia into accounts in the Dominican Republic. Can you deny or clarify this information that has been published? I think it would be very relevant, not only for you, but also for her, if you could deny it. Did you pay 2.4 million, or did you participate in the deposit of 1.5 million that Mrs. Laufer may have in a bank in Santo Domingo? At least, maybe you can clarify for us if you think Mrs. Laufer achieved her goals in the company. At least if she achieved the goals that you or whoever assigned her, like getting close to the president's wife, who ultimately had to approve your rescue. Mr. Hidalgo, I'm asking you, since Guacalua was created, how many times have you met with Begoña Gomez? According to the investigations, at least 3 times. On June 24th, at the Globalia headquarters in Pozuelo. If that's not correct, please correct me. On July 16th, at the same headquarters, we'll talk about that day now, and on July 24th, through a video conference. At the National Court, you were asked about these meetings and replied you didn't remember. Do you remember now? Have you recovered your memory, or are you still trying to make us believe that you don't remember meeting with Begoña Gomez at the Globalia headquarters? I'm asking you because your own company, Globalia, acknowledged these same meetings in an official statement in April 2024, just 5 months before you told the judge, I don't remember. How curious, 5 months before you didn't remember, your company, in a statement, informed the court, or rather informed all of us in a public statement, that those meetings had indeed taken place. And also, because according to the judicial investigation, Mr. Victor de Aldama also attended those meetings on June 24 and July 16. What a coincidence. Mr. Hidalgo, do you confirm the presence of Aldama at the meetings you held at Globalia, at the Globalia headquarters, with Ms. Begoña Gomez, the Prime Minister's wife? Could you explain to us what he was doing? Was he an advisor for bailouts in a meeting with the Prime Minister's wife while your bailout was being discussed? Do you really want us to believe that there was no conversation about bailouts here, or that you didn't bring up that topic that concerned you so much, and that we've read about so much in the messages which truly worried you? Because if not, then why would the CEO of a company meet with the president's wife? Who had or aspired to would meet with the president's wife. Let's talk about the bailout. 27 days after the last meeting you had with Begoña Gomez, at least the last one we know of, you formally requested the bailout. Finally, according to what you declared to the National Court under oath, you were losing 6 million euros. You were losing, Mr. Hidalgo, 6 million euros a day at the time of the bailout request. On May 18, 2020, you obtained 141 million guaranteed by the ICO. Is that correct? How many times, Mr. Hidalgo, did you meet with the Deputy Prime Minister and Economy Minister Nadia Calviño to obtain the ICO guarantee? Did you ever meet? And about the bailout? Did you ever meet with Ms. Nadia Calviño to discuss matters related to the bailout? See how seriously your fixer took the reports that The Objective even published the following in April 2024. I'll read it to you verbatim. Calviño met with Hidalgo and Aldama at Abalos's house to negotiate the Europa bailout. Mr. Hidalgo, this is extremely serious. Do you confirm or deny it? Were you at Abalos's house with Ms. Nadia Calviño, who was the Minister of Economy and First Deputy Prime Minister at that time, and with Mr. Victor de Aldama talking about your bailout? How many meetings did you personally have with Ms. Calviño between May and November of 2020? According to the investigation, Abalos told Calviño the following, and I will read it to you literally again. He's at the end of his rope. He can no longer deceive the creditors. Mr. Hidalgo, were you so worried about your bailout? Did you really need Mr. Abalos to send that message to Ms. Calviño? Did you ask Mr. Abalos to send that message to try to pressure or at least push or at least ask what was happening with your bailout at that moment? I'm telling you this, Mr. Hidalgo, because I have another question for you, and that is, if you told that to Abalos, with whom under oath you also swore you didn't speak. What a coincidence that Mr. Abalos was mediating for you with Ms. Calviño while you were telling the National Court under oath 4 years later that you didn't talk to Mr. Abalos about the bailout. What a coincidence. And I don't trust it at all. Did you know, Mr. Hidalgo, that Mrs. Calviño suggested deducting from the bailout the dividends that your family had paid itself? Did you know that? Mr. Hidalgo, how many dividends were paid during the bailout year? You should at least know how many dividends, how many millions, were distributed the year you were asking the Spanish people during the pandemic to make the effort to contribute 475 million to the Hidalgo family, who owns about 95% of the group that was requesting the bailout. Don't you think, Mr. Hidalgo, that it's perhaps obscene to ask the Spanish people for millions who were going through a pandemic while you were distributing dividends at the same time? Thank you. Surely the Spanish people who are listening to us, who are the ones who have paid out of their own pockets through their effort and their taxes, the 475 million, are left speechless upon learning that the company that was asking for them was distributing dividends at the same time. I'll read it to you. Voz Populi, December 3rd, 2025. The SEPI technicians described this decision as very bad, as immoral. What do you think about it? Well then, given your silence, let's go to the height of obscenity, which is the key date in all of this. July 16th, 2020. Do you know what happened, honorable members? On the same day, July 16th, 2020, the tribute to the victims of the first wave of COVID was being held in a state ceremony at the Royal Palace. That same day, Sanchez, yes, Calviño and Abalos met to discuss the bailout, just 35 days before you requested it. You have to see these things. How could they know? The fact is that everyone went to do their own tasks. Ms. Calviño, that same day, the day of the tribute to the COVID victims, passed the problem on to Montero. I'm reading verbatim. A message that has been published. I spoke with Maria Jesus, and she is aware that we'll have to hurry next week. Wow, she passed the problem on to Maria Jesus Montero, and Abalos did his thing with his people too. And she received you that same day at the Ministry of Transport, along with, of course, the fixer Victor Daldama, and the icing on the cake. Not satisfied with the tribute to the COVID victims, coinciding with the meeting between Sanchez, Abalos, and Calviño. Calviño passing the problem on to Montero. And Abalos meeting with you and with the corrupt link in all the schemes that same day, that same afternoon, was when you received Begoña Gomez at the Globalia headquarters. What a coincidence. I have a question, and it's as follows. A message that was received at night, and it's the following, which I will read to you verbatim. The boss Abalos just sent a message to Javi Hidalgo. That Minister Calviño told him that next week he will be more at ease, and it seems that everything has worked. Mr. Hidalgo, what is everything? What is this everything that the message says has worked? What did you have to do for so many things to happen on the same day? What did you have to do? What did you have to contribute? So that the most important thing on the day of the tribute to the victims of the pandemic was to discuss the bailout of Air Europa, which hadn't even been submitted yet. Mr. Hidalgo, honorable members, do you think it's reasonable that while Spaniards were paying tribute to the victims of COVID, the ministries, the ministers, and the Prime Minister were focused on a bailout that still hadn't even been submitted? It seems, Mr. Hidalgo, that the Minister of Economy, Ms. Calviño, didn't like the idea of the bailout together with the dividends very much. But at Maria Jesus Montero's ministry, at the Treasury, they quickly got to work to make it happen in record time. Do you know how long it took Montero's SEPI to process the bailout? You've probably read it everywhere. Only 70 days, 75 if we count the cabinet meeting, the Council of Ministers.
¿Sabe del Consejo de Ministros?
Do you know what the average time was for the bailouts during that period? Of the 30 bailouts processed by SEPI and the 28 that went through the procedure. The average was 355 days, no more, and no less than 5 times longer than the rushed bailout of Air Europa, for which they met and you did everything that was required, according to that message from Minister Abalos. Mr. Hidalgo, did you have meetings with CP representatives about the bailout? Did you ever meet with Vicente Fernandez? Did you ever meet with Vicente Fernandez at the SEPI headquarters? And at the apartment that Vicente Fernandez had, where he apparently used to conduct meetings, according to what we've read. On Diego de Leon? Were you ever at Vicente Fernandez's apartment on Diego de Leon? And did you ever meet with Bartolomé Lora? I'm asking you because on Tuesday at the Supreme Court, you admitted that you did. So I'm asking you, Mr. Hidalgo, how many times did you meet with Mr. Bartolomé Lora? And do you know if the meetings with Lora were organized directly by Minister Montero? Were they organized by Vicente Fernandez, or were they organized directly by Coldo, who acted as the contact? I'm telling you this because precisely messages have been found on Coldo's phone saying, "Tell Lora to call Javi. Mr. Hidalgo, are you Javi?" Did Lora call you? Did Lora call you after that message? And tell us, what did Coldo gain by acting as a messenger, or as the investigation says, as a parallel channel between Lora and you, between you? And Lora? In August 2020, different things happened, which you have also talked about before the Supreme Court. On August 7th, the Ministry of Transport announced that the bailout was at an advanced stage. Curiously, they hadn't even requested it yet, and it was already in an advanced stage. Was it witchcraft, Mr. Hidalgo, or were there some operations that were already underway even before it was requested? Don't you think the time has come, Mr. Hidalgo, here today in Parliament, and before the eyes of the Spaniards who paid for your bailout, to tell the truth? What opaque dealings were carried out so that the bailout was already at an advanced stage days before it was even requested? You're staying silent. You're staying silent like Coldo. The formal request was submitted on August 20th, 12 days after the ministry announced that it was in progress. The note was written, as we have learned from the media, by the Secretary of State, Pedro Saura, who testified yesterday at the Supreme Court and has admitted that he called you Mr. Hidalgo. Is that correct? Do you confirm or deny that Mr. Saura called you? We have no reason to doubt Mr. Saura in this case. Or did you meet with Mr. Saura during the processing of the bailout while he was the Secretary of State for Transport? Look, according to the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, the note had a high strategic value for Air Europa. We've read this in every media outlet. Well, it served to reassure its creditors by showing that the bailout, which would guarantee the airline's future, was on track. Mr. Hidalgo, did it have strategic value? Was the bailout strategic? You said no at the Supreme Court. Did you know about the press release before it was published? Did you ask the ministry to publish that press release to reassure your creditors? Or do you maintain, as you have said, that what really interested you was the official document that SEPI had to give you and gave you on September 9th? Now let's talk about September 9th. Because let me make an observation. You say it was of little importance to you, and yet, why then did Aldama, your consultant for rescues, forward it to you before it was published? It seems it wasn't very important, but Mr. Hidalgo, the question is, did you receive the draft of the press release before it was published, yes or no? And if it wasn't important, then why did you and Aldama go to the Marbella chalet, which you would later allegedly use as alleged consideration for Mr. Abalos to celebrate it? We have some news that has been published about this, and I would like you to see it. Hidalgo and Aldama celebrated the Air Europa rescue in a chalet that they paid for Abalos. They celebrated and paid for it. They explained what was requested, what happened, and how many people went. Do you deny it or confirm it, sir? Mr. Hidalgo? Hidalgo and Aldama visited Abalos at his Marbella villa to make sure everything was to his liking. Did you visit Mr. Abalos's Marbella villa, the one they gave him for 9,800 euros to see if everything was in order, yes or no? Let's discuss the villa. Mr. Hidalgo, as you have seen, it has been reported that in return for those efforts, Abalos spent his summer vacation at the Villa Para Villa in August 2020 for several days, accompanied by his family right in the middle of the rescue process. And just as you were about to request it, I'm asking you, Mr. Hidalgo, did you thank Abalos with an all-expenses-paid royal-style vacation at that villa, or is the prosecutor's office lying, or are the media lying? Do you have the opportunity? Do you have anything to deny it? Did you or the Globalia group, of which you were the CEO, allocate 9,800 euros to pay for Abalos and his family's vacation at the Villa Para Chalet? Did you give Aldama the money so he could pay for it? Or was it given to Patricia Uriz, who was the one who signed the contract for the rental of that chalet? Patricia Uriz, Koldo's ex-wife, who also appeared here with you. Second attempt. It seems that Ms. Patricia Uriz acted as the paymaster, not only for the PSOE, but also for the scheme, because she was just as likely to chistoras said in Ferraz as she was to pay the 8,000 euros out of the 9,800 that were paid in cash in exchange for the rental of that chalet. Mr. Hidalgo, do you deny that? As the investigation states, 8,000 euros in cash were allocated to the stay that was provided by Mr. Victor de Aldama or by you and paid for. By Ms. Patricia Uriz to Mr. Abalos' family so they could enjoy that vacation, yes or no? I have already shown you the news from The Objective, which says that Hidalgo and Aldama, according to the report, visited Mr. Abalos at the Marbella Villa. Once more, do you confirm this is true? Did you travel in a motorhome, as the news says, to visit that villa? Did you organize a party in that villa before Mr. Abalos lived there that summer? You seem to have things to celebrate, even though you said the press release didn't matter to you just 2 days ago. Look, just imagine how happy they must have been that you went. And in a message, you even say that everything is paid for because of the inconvenience caused. Mr. Hidalgo, what inconveniences were those? What inconveniences did Mr. Abalos have to go through with you and with the government to get you the alleged quid pro quo of a villa worth 9,800 euros, of which 8,000 were paid in cash? Speaking of cash, I imagine you have read and are aware that Mrs. Leonor Gonzalez Pano confirmed just last week before the Supreme Court that Aldama had told her that, and I quote literally, the Hidalgos gave her 500,000 euros in a sports bag for the bailout. Was it for the bailout, in exchange for the bailout, or for handling Europa's bailout? I ask you, Mr. Hidalgo, did your father and you hand over 500,000 euros in cash in a sports bag to Coldo and Aldama at the family home in Puerta de Hierro a few days before the bailout was approved? Yes or no? Do you have the opportunity to deny it? To deny what some witnesses have said? And notice that 3 witnesses, specifically Leonor Gonzalez Pano, her mother Carmen Pano, and the driver Alvaro Gallego testified to it in the Supreme Court, confirmed it in the Supreme Court, also under oath. And I ask myself and I ask you, members of the committee, why should we believe someone we've seen and heard, who allegedly lied in his testimony before the National Court or in the Supreme Court, and not believe the 3 people who also testified under oath? What I'm telling you, Mr. Hidalgo, why should we believe them and not you? Why should we believe you and not them? Let's move into September and continue with the rescue. On August 20th, as we said, you requested it after Abalos's lavish vacation and the process began. But anyway, it didn't meet the formal requirements, the criteria set by SEPI, the 13 famous criteria that later had to be relaxed, at least the L one, as you well know. SEPI raised objections, is that correct? Did SEPI raise objections to your bailout? Aldama left written proof of all this. He says, quoting Aldama directly, this issue is really screwed and he's just trying to find a way out. I get that could be you. And he just called Begoña. Mr. Hidalgo, do you confirm or deny that you called Begoña Gomez in a moment of desperation to unblock or push forward the Air Europa bailout? Do you confirm or deny that you called Begoña Gomez at the critical moment to unblock or push forward the bailout? The Spanish people have been asking themselves this question since the first news broke, Mr. Hidalgo, and I believe you owe an answer to the Spanish people who provided the 475 million you requested. They are the ones asking you, did you call the wife of the Prime Minister to unblock the bailout, yes or no? Be quiet. Did you ever speak with Mrs. Begoña Gomez about the bailout? He remained silent. Did you ask her in that call, in any other call, or at any of the meetings to mediate or intercede with her husband, the Prime Minister? That's likely why Coldo made a statement to a journalist months ago. The Hidalgos mentioned in front of me that the favorable treatment Mrs. Gomez had given had to be repaid. Do you deny that, Mr. Hidalgo? Is Coldo making it up? Where did this conversation take place? Where does Mr. Coldo Garcia Izaguirre say he heard you say that Mrs. Gomez should be compensated for how well she behaved during the Air Europa bailout? Coldo mentions 16 to 20 visits to the Puerta de Hierro residence. Did those 16 or 20 visits to your home actually take place? I'll read it to you verbatim. Coldo says, they started by talking about 100,000, then 200,000, and ended up at 1 million. 1 million, Mr. Hidalgo? 1 million? 1 million for the Prime Minister's wife? What was the generous favor that the wife of the Prime Minister had done for you to say, in Coldo's words, that she had to be paid 1 million? 5 days after your alleged call to Begoña, what some media call the panic button, another curious circumstance occurred, another curious coincidence. 5 days after that, September 3rd came September 8th when you were celebrating. What a coincidence. a general shareholders meeting at Globalia Corporación Empresarial, which approved a dividend of 6 million, in addition to the dividends that had already been distributed the previous year. A dividend in favor of the Hidalgo family, who, as I mentioned, owns 94.86% of this corporation. Mr. Hidalgo, did you approve it as CEO? Do you remember approving that 6 million dividend on September 8th? It's the 5th dividend you were distributing among yourselves in just 18 months while you were asking the Spanish people to give you 475 million. 5 dividends for the Hidalgos and 475 million from the Spanish people to bail out the Hidalgo family's company, which is the one that was distributing dividends. While you were asking the Spanish people for 475 million, did you ever report that dividend to FAS, to the Sol Fund, to the Rescue Fund, to SEPI, to the Ministry of Finance, to Vicente Fernandez, or to Maria Jesus Montero? But that's not the most serious thing, honorable members. That was only the first event on September 8th. There was another. That same afternoon, the same day they had approved the 6 million dividend at the shareholders meeting. After you, 5 days after you had sent, allegedly called Mrs. Begoña Gomez, the wife of the president, the husband of Begoña Gomez, the Prime Minister forwarded to Ábalos a message that a friend had sent him, according to what he said. And he literally orders him, I quote, "I think it's worth reconsidering the bailout. Mr. Hidalgo, were you the friend who wrote to the Prime Minister? Have you ever written to the Prime Minister? Have you exchanged WhatsApp messages with the Prime Minister? If it wasn't you, Mr. Hidalgo, then who was it? Maybe, as some media outlets say, Voz Populi says, the friend Mori. Could it have been Mauricio Lucena who wrote that message, which wasn't very good for the Hidalgos either? But it didn't stop there. Dividends were distributed on September 8th. The Prime Minister sent the message giving instructions about the bailout to Ábalos on September 8th. And moreover, exactly 24 hours after Sanchez told Ábalos to take another look at it, at 9:26 in the morning, Aldama wrote to Nuria, his secretary, and said, I quote, "Yesterday we finally got the letter from the government saying that they are giving us the funding." Wow, the day of the dividend, the day Sanchez gives instructions to Ábalos, the day Mr. Aldama was informed, at least. And he the next day told his secretary that they had approved the funding. Mr. Hidalgo, did Nuria pass that message on to you? Yes or no? And if it wasn't for Nuria, wouldn't it have been for you? I'm asking because either your consultant for bailouts at 12,100 euros a month was leaking information from Moncloa to your secretary, or else, if not, the message was for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll repeat it to you. Yesterday, we finally got the letter from the government. Yesterday, September 8th, the day of the dividend. Yesterday, September 8th. Yesterday, Sanchez told Ábalos to think it over. And yesterday was the day they confirmed the letter in which they were told they would get the bailout. The bailout of 475 million to the company that had sponsored, through Guacalua, the activities of the wife of the Prime Minister who authorized the bailout. Isn't this a conflict of interest, ladies and gentlemen? Isn't this a textbook case of an alleged conflict of interest? Isn't there a clear link between the sponsored party and the one authorizing the bailout? Between Ms. Gomez and Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Gomez's husband, who was the one ultimately authorizing the bailout. And the second to last coincidence, Mr. Hidalgo, the letter from SEPI that they sent to you, verbatim. The UCO found on Koldo's phone the draft of that letter sent by Ábalos on the very same September 9th, Mr. Hidalgo. Did Koldo send you the letter draft? Or did Koldo send it to Aldama? And Aldama sent it to you. This very Tuesday, you literally said in the Supreme Court, we did request an official document from SEPI that was made on September 9th. September 9th. This is the letter they found as a draft on Koldo's phone, where the date was also left to be filled in. What was the advisor to the Minister of Transport doing? What was that person from SEPI, which depends on the Treasury, doing? was the Minister of Transport, whom you invited to the Villa para Villa, going out of his way to make you feel more at ease. And that's why Coldo kept a copy of that letter on his phone. And who gave it to Coldo? It had to be someone from SEPI. Was it Bartolome Lora? Was it Bartolome Lora who sent Coldo, at Abalos's request, the letter you so badly needed to reassure your creditors? Isn't this alleged interest peddling and alleged influence peddling? 2 months later, on November 3rd, the bailout arrived, and coincidentally, another coincidence, ladies and gentlemen, just 1 day after you collected your last dividend. Had you already divided up the millions, Mr. Hidalgo? We Spaniards had given you 475 million from our own pockets to revalue your company, and you ended up selling it to the highest bidder. But since Mr. Lora didn't want to deny it last week in this very room, maybe it was so that, and I quote, the Hidalgos wouldn't lose money. Lora didn't deny it. I'm finishing now, Madam President, by closing the circle. That concludes my first round. Mr. Hidalgo, you didn't want to appear. And that's why I had to do a monologue in which I constantly asked you questions. More than 50 questions that you didn't want to answer at all. But allow me, before I tell you, I want to say something to the Spanish people who are watching us and who paid for your bailout. Your bailout is explained by the wife of the Prime Minister, who is now being prosecuted for 4 crimes. It's explained by Aldama, the link in all the schemes. Coldo, sitting in the dock at the Supreme Court, explains it. And it's explained by Mr. Lora, who is under investigation for alleged abuse of office by Investigating Court number 49. With a written order from the Prime Minister to his Minister Abalos, think about it, the very same afternoon, his family was splitting a 6 million dividend and they were given the letter draft that reassured their creditors. The draft of a letter about their bailout found by the UCO on Coldo's phone. What we've seen today, ladies and gentlemen, is precisely a textbook case of alleged influence peddling. A textbook case of alleged conflict of interest. And above all, we've confirmed and heard evidence that leaves no room for doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that you allegedly lied under oath before the National Court or before the Supreme Court about the 475 million that were still, at that time, in September 2024, on your company's balance sheet. At the beginning of this intervention, I asked you, Mr. Hidalgo, why aren't you brave and face the Spanish people who were the ones who paid for the bailout? You have not been able to face the Spanish people today, the ones who paid for your bailout. But the Spanish people gave you the 475 million from their own pockets. After this refusal to testify, now you know why. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yes, excuse me, Mr. Miranda. I wanted to make an observation. You said failure to appear rather than refusal to testify. Just to clarify, yes, twice. So if you want to correct it for the record.
Please, I correct myself. Indeed, he has appeared. What he has not done is testify, exercising his right not to testify.
Thank you. That's right. Thank you, Mr. Miranda de Lara. Now, Mrs. Gomez Enriquez has the floor for 50 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this investigative committee. And your presence here today responds to the need to clarify whether your group, Globalia, gained access to public resources and government decisions through a scheme that is currently under investigation by the justice system. We are focusing on the professional and personal relationship with figures from the so-called Coldo scheme, especially with Mr. Aldama. It would be interesting to know whether the payments made by your company to the intermediaries of the scheme were for actual services or if they were the price paid to gain the privileges granted to you by the various ministries. If you were to speak today, which you are not going to do, your words would be key to determining whether the state's control mechanisms worked properly or if they were bypassed for the benefit of a network of private interests. You have stated that the payments made to Mr. Aldama were for services. Can you detail what specific consulting or mediation services justified Mr. Aldama having direct access to the rescue negotiations with the Ministry of Transport and with SEPI? Did you already know Mr. Aldama personally before hiring him? Did you have a relationship with him? Why did you hire him? What did you agree to when hiring him? Why did you hire Mr. Aldama precisely when the process for those public aid measures was starting? Not before, if you already knew him. You knew his abilities. Various pieces of information and testimonies, Mr. Hidalgo, point to meetings between you, Mr. Aldama, and Ms. Begoña Gomez at the Cili of Globalia on dates close to the approval of the bailout. What was the purpose of those meetings? And what role did Ms. Gomez play in speeding up the procedures so that the bailout of 475 million euros was granted by SEPI? You also knew Ms. Gomez beforehand. You knew both of them, Mr. Aldama and Ms. Gomez. And you were already plotting this so that at the right moment you would decide to act. In your most recent statement, you have categorically denied any involvement of Begoña Gomez in the rescue. But Globalia officially admitted in the past that both of them held at least 3 secret meetings in June and July of 2020, coinciding with the rescue negotiations. 2 of these meetings were held at Globalia's headquarters in Pozuelo de Alarcón. Is it true, Mr. Hidalgo? Why did you say yes at first and then say no in court? Could you explain why a subsidiary of Globalia sponsored Africa Center events led by Ms. Gomez in London precisely during the key months of the bailout? Was that sponsorship a necessary condition for the doors of the Ministries of Economy and Finance to be open to you? In other words, did you and Ms. Begoña Gomez exchange favors so that both of you benefited in some way? Let's talk about Air Europa and Soluciones de Gestión. The investigation focuses on how Air Europa became the key carrier for the company. Soluciones de Gestión, the epicenter of the corruption scheme, where Soluciones de Gestión paid 2.5 million euros to Air Europa for chartering 11 planes to bring masks from China during the state of emergency. These flights, Mr. Hidalgo, took place between March 26 and June 4, 2020. It's astonishing that a national emergency operation like the transport of masks ended up becoming a circular business between your airline and a shell company involved in the scheme. It's not just that you chartered your planes, it's also that you bought supplies from the same intermediaries who later helped you secure the largest bailout in Spain's history. On November 3rd, the bailout for your company, Air Europa, was approved. How do you explain that Soluciones de Gestión, a company with no previous experience, chose almost exclusively Air Europa, your company, for charters worth millions, if it wasn't through the direct mediation of Mr. Atama? If the flights were managed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as you have stated, why were the contracts and payments channeled through Mr. Atama's company instead of being made directly with the public administration? We're talking about millions of euros. You also admitted that Mr. Koldo regularly met with you at the Ministry of Transport. Were those visits meant to coordinate medical supply deliveries on your planes? Were those meetings used to influence the bailout conditions? At any point, did you receive indications that Mr. Koldo was acting under direct orders from former Minister Abalos? You knew he was his right-hand man. And when Minister Abalos couldn't meet, he would meet with him instead. Did you know that? Why did it end up being your company's planes that brought the masks linked to the scheme? Why did the scheme choose Air Europa to bring the masks to Spain? We have so many companies in Spain. Why did they choose you? We also have the Army's airplanes. Why did they choose you? They did business there too. Not just with the rescue. It feels like that deal was already being set up. In the mass business, the rescue was already being planned. Was this the previous step? So at what point did Globalia decide to request the aid? The same scheme was suggested to you during the mass deal, that you should seek a bailout. You say that the SEPI loan was a bad deal, but even so, you were constantly meeting with Cueldos at the ministry. If the conditions of the bailout were so bad, what other goal were you trying to achieve with those meetings? Can you confirm whether Air Europa formally requested a bailout from SEPI before or after the official call for the strategic company's solvency support fund was published? After so much time avoiding naming names, yesterday you stated before the Supreme Court that the bailout of Europa was a matter for the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and not so much for the Ministry of Transport. You also admitted that you met secretly with Nadia Calviño and Mr. Aldama at Mr. Abalos's house. If this bailout was a technical and transparent operation by SEPI, what were you doing with Aldama in that meeting? Why that meeting? This meeting was kept outside the official channels of the Ministry of Economy. They had parallel meetings. They pretended to follow the official channels while secretly meeting with other people to pull the strings. For years, the official version was that Transport led the rescue, but now that's no longer the case. Transport has nothing to do with it anymore. What a coincidence. Have you made any deal with Mr. Abalos or with the PSOE to avoid involving your wife, Mr. Abalos, and Mr. Cordo? Can you say who you met at the Ministry of Economy, on what date, and whether those meetings occurred before the formal request? Thank you. Who did you communicate with at SEPI during the weeks leading up to the approval of the bailout on November 3, 2020? Thank you. When did you find out exactly that you were granted the aid? Did you find out before the rest of the Spanish people? And even before the official State Gazette? Did Ramiro Campos handle the contracts involved in the process? Was the rescue in the hands of professionals such as Mr. Ramiro Campos? Why did you have a parallel line of contact in the President's circle? If the rescue was really a purely technical process and not a political one, why did Aldama inform Cordo in real time and also tell him that you had called Begoña Gomez on the day when the rescue negotiations were at their most critical point? On July 16, 2020, while you were meeting with Begoña Gomez at the Globalia office, President Sanchez was holding a meeting with Abalos and Calviño to discuss the rescue of Europa. Did you know that meeting was taking place on the same day? Were you aware that meeting was happening at that time? Was it a coincidence that you were meeting with Begoña Gomez on one side and Mr. Abalos was meeting with Calviño and Sanchez on the other? Were you all perfectly synchronized? What was going on? Was information being relayed from one meeting to the other and vice versa? Mr. Hidalgo, it's hard to believe that while your company's survival was at stake, bags with €500,000 in cash were circulating without you supposedly knowing anything about it. The accusations that this money was used to buy political favors are very serious. There are two witnesses, Mrs. Carmen Pano and her daughter, Leonor Gonzalez. They testified before the Supreme Court that Aldama and Cordo went to their father's house to pick up a bag with €500,000. They testified before the Supreme Court about the bailout. Where were you those days? To pick up a bag. They testified about the bailout. Where were you then? Did you attend the meeting at your home or the Supreme Court with your father? Do you deny being there when the money was collected and delivered? What legal basis did you have for giving the money to intermediaries linked to the Ministry of Transport? You have stated that all payments to Mr. Aldama were for real services and, moreover, invoiced. Why have investigations found that part of that money also ended up as extra cash payments for the scheme? Was that cash the extra payment needed so that Ministers Calviño and Montero wouldn't put up technical obstacles to that 475 million euro bailout? Mr. Hidalgo, it's hard for us to argue that your company was strategic and also solvent when the courts confirmed that it owed almost 60 million euros to the Treasury even before the pandemic began. Explain to us, tell us how it's possible that with your accounts now under suspicion by the National Court, you were able to get the government to turn a blind eye and inject 475 million euros of public money into your company. Did you know that SEPI regulations prohibited rescuing employees with outstanding tax debts? And even so, you requested money for Globalia, and Globalia owed the Treasury almost 60 million euros for VAT from 2017. But you didn't stay still, you kept moving forward. The goal was to get the money at all costs. So you created Europa Holding right before the bailout, a company with no employees and no activity. Just like Relativista Analysis. Levante, a shell company. In the Plus Ultra bailout, there was Levante Analysis. In the Air Europa bailout, there is Air Europa Holding. I don't want to think about it anymore, but I see a similarity there that smells fishy to me. It smells fishy. Both airlines owed money to their creditors. Were you also laundering money coming from Venezuela? Let me tell you, Europa Holding was created just a year before the bailout was approved, in November 2019, with a minimum share capital of 3,000 euros. At the time it received a multi-million euro injection from SEPI, the company had no employees and no real commercial activity. The investigation at Madrid's Investigating Court number 49 is analyzing whether the use of this company allowed them to circumvent the ban on bailing out companies with tax debts, since the global parent company had an ongoing dispute of almost 60 million euros with the tax authorities, which would have legally prevented access to the funds. Did you use this company not only to receive those 475 million euros, but also to pay their creditors? Were they using the same operating method as Plus Ultra? How do you justify a company with no employees and only minimum legal capital getting SEPI's fastest bailout, while thousands of solvent small and mid-sized businesses went bankrupt waiting for aid? How do you justify... I see you are very uncomfortable. Was the creation of Air Europa Holding a firewall specifically designed so that SEPI could ignore this debt? Since now you, Mr. Hidalgo, are pointing the finger at Ministers Calviño and Montero, who gave the instruction in the Treasury or in SEPI to validate an operation in favor of a shell company. It was a shell company that they created out of nothing to receive 475 million euros of public money from the taxes of all Spaniards. Do you realize how serious this is? Who in the government assured you this irregularity wouldn't be an obstacle? Guaranteed irregularity. Since you're not clarifying anything for us because you've decided not to speak today, we're left with that doubt. It's a shame because you could have clarified many of these issues. I'm finishing up, Madam President, making a general closing statement about the situation and telling Mr. Hidalgo that he came here today precisely for that, to say nothing. But the reality shown by the courts is very different. It's that of a company that owed almost 60 million euros to the Treasury. And instead of regularizing its situation, it preferred to surround itself with middlemen, bags of cash, and meetings at ministry headquarters that were not on the official schedule. It's insulting for any Spaniard that while citizens were being asked to make a huge effort in the middle of the pandemic, your company, Ms. Gomez...
Excuse me for interrupting you for a second. Let's maintain the presumption of innocence. Thank you.
Of course. Above all, thank you, Madam President.
It's an interrogation. Thank you.
Your company cashed in on the transport of masks through a corrupt scheme and then received a bailout of 475 million euros, bypassing the rules that apply to any other business owner. You now point to Ministers Calvino and Montero, but you can't explain why you needed an intermediary like Mr. Aldama or an advisor like Coldo if your cause was so fair and transparent. Are you leaving this committee? Leaving more questions than answers. We don't know the origin of the cash, you haven't explained the secret meetings, and you haven't justified the preferential treatment both in SEPI and in the ministries. Your silences today are the clearest proof that the Air Europa bailout did not save a strategic airline. The only thing that was saved was a system of privileges for personal gain. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez. Ms. Macias Mateos from the Socialist Parliamentary Group has the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Mr. Hidalgo, good morning. From the Socialist Parliamentary Group, we wanted to raise, even if you are not going to comment in the committee, some issues that are of interest and should be reflected in the committee's minutes, as well as some reflections and questions that we also wanted to raise. Most of the groups in this chamber were not in favor of creating this investigative committee. It coincided with Ms. Maria Jesus Montero being the Minister of Finance, responsible for an entity under the Ministry of Finance, which was SEPI, and that elections were being held in Andalusia. That's why you are sitting today in the Clara Campoamor room of the Senate. We won't go on at length, but we can already see how, on the Popular Party's bench, they are setting themselves up as screenwriting experts. We are going to stick to the facts, concrete facts. The context of the COVID-19 pandemic, in which the Popular Party did not help this country, makes it very clear that everything that happened was extraordinary. And it was also extraordinary for airlines worldwide. In Europe, we have clear examples of what happened. And the truth is, very painful damage was being done throughout the entire economy. And in this field of transportation and mobility, we saw how companies like Lufthansa, Air France, and KLM, they received from the states they depended on amounts of several billion each to be helped and supported. At first, the losses affected working capital, but there came a point when the economic losses affected solvency of the companies themselves. This was the context. Why does SEPI take over the management at a certain point? After the modification of the support framework for EU funds, which were initially granted by the Official Credit Institute, and then they go to the State Industrial Holdings Company. Well, obviously, because of their experience in managing solvency support aid for companies, under what procedures? Under procedures that were regulated, published in official regulations, and also under supervision procedures, so that there would be equal treatment among all beneficiaries, procedures that could be audited and supervised, and guarantees when granting the funds, which were obviously public. And we want to remind you here that these were not non-repayable grants. Because the Partido Popular never gave them away, they were loans that companies had to pay back and loans that were also repaid with interest. The work of the technical and legal teams who managed all those procedures is also being judged in this commission. In addition to a political decision by a progressive government that helped save 60,000 jobs in companies like Costera Responsible and others within our country. 60,000 jobs? What would have happened, for example, with something, What would have happened to the Balearic Islands and the citizens of the Balearic Islands if Air Europa had been left out of this support umbrella through loans? Because, of course, the Popular Party has not brought up at all in this committee that those loans, which were arranged through the State Industrial Holdings Company, clearly benefited a company that had its registered office and tax address in the Balearic Islands, and that provided most of the service. Also to the citizens who face the disadvantages of island life, and that's true, insularity is something people suffer from. Also, how much would they have had to pay 4 or 5 times more for flights? Would they have had flights? What if Aero Europa hadn't gotten that loan? No one here is asking that. And what would have happened if SEPI hadn't handled this case and other cases with clean and regulated procedures? What would have happened in Spain if Spain hadn't done what other European Union countries had done within the normal framework of support that was set up at that time? Because we all have to remember that while measures of this magnitude were being taken in Spain, the Partido Popular government was voting no to everything in the Spanish parliament. That is in the context of what was happening in the country at that time. We also want to refer to the reviews carried out on the case files, the one for Air Europa and the ones for the rest of the companies that received this type of loan with an obligation to repay with interest. Not only did they pass internal controls, there were also external ones. In the case of Air Europa, a loan was granted according to the 13 criteria. It underwent a correction process, just as other cases underwent their corresponding corrections. In addition, eligibility was regulated by the Royal Decree Law, which was binding for both the managers and the applicant beneficiaries. This case was reviewed by the State General Comptroller's Office. It was also reviewed by the Court of Auditors. And furthermore, this case was also reviewed by the Court of Justice of the European Union, since another company challenged this aid before that court. But we want to make a special reference to what the report of the Court of Auditors said about the work of SEPI. It said that it was applying the procedure correctly. It applied it in a non-discriminatory way. That is what we heard from the Partido Popular, that Air Europa was granted aid in record time over other entities. What we've heard in this committee and in other parallel committees organized by the Partido Popular is untrue. There were no irregularities with Air Europa. A procedure with safeguards for public funds was used, and we repeat, it was not a non-repayable grant, but rather a loan with an obligation to repay it, and also with the corresponding interest. We have to ask ourselves this, and we would have liked to ask you as well. We see reputational damage to the state-owned industrial holdings company in the public sphere. And there's an underlying issue here. When the Partido Popular was in power, SEPI neither delivered good results nor had transparent management. Nor was it an example of good management practices. But there is also reputational damage to Aero Europa. We can see that already. How does this affect a company, its managers, its owners, and the capital involved in supporting the company's operations? Because, of course, here we've seen how those huge academic chairs are set up. On the Popular Party's bench, they spin these grand narratives. But what responsibility do they have regarding the reputational damage that's being done? Mr. Hidalgo, to finish. Here we've seen how the Popular Party plays games with the Senate, changing the rules in the middle of the game. Anything is possible. Maybe we can also expect that they'll call you again for a future session of the committee. And if I may, Madam President, since so many references have been made to Ms. Begoña Gomez, I also need to address this. All these stories that the Popular Party has about Ms. Begoña Gomez, we don't know how long they're going to last. What we ask of the Popular Party is that they show respect. And we also ask that justice be served with you as well, and with your accomplices, those who fabricate fake news for you, so you can string together investigation committee after investigation committee. The Popular Party, exactly.
Right.
Thank you, President. You don't govern because democracy has rules.
I ask you to retract that.
Excuse me?
I ask you to retract that, just as I told Ms. Gomez.
In what sense?
Well, in the sense that you are accusing other people, the media, even the justice system. Say it again yourself. You already know.
We ask the justice system to deliver justice. If you could say Thank you very much, Madam President. I also point out that the Partido Popular is not in power because our democracy has rules, and they must be respected. That's why what you do in this and other committees, not only trying to dehumanize and delegitimize political opponents and those who come to testify many times, but also their families through scandalous accusations sometimes, as well as false ones. It's what Umberto Eco called in his novel Number Zero, the famous smear machine. Sounds familiar, right? Well, you're going to be stuck wading in that mud for a long time as long as the Socialist Party wants to keep governing. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Macias. Now, the witness, Mr. Hidalgo, if you would like to make any comments, you have 3 minutes if you wish. Go ahead.
Honestly, I'd rather not respond to that disgusting comment. Questions they've asked me, so I have nothing to say about it.
Perfect. So let's continue with the last part of this committee. The spokespersons of the parliamentary groups will have 7 minutes to speak. From lowest to highest, Mrs. Gomez has left. Therefore, Mrs. Matias has the floor.
All right.
Mrs. Macias, excuse me. No, I just wasn't sure if you had heard me. Don't worry, take all the time you need. Thank you. I've already said yes, thank you. Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Madam President, I won't take long because we believe that when your opponent makes a mistake, you should let them make it. The Popular Party is making a mistake with this commission. We have already seen that they insist on delegitimizing everything, the work of public servants, the work done by the company, this and other companies. Not just the government's work, which is systematically delegitimized because democratic rules are not respected. We saw last Monday, when Maria Jesus Montero came, Mr. Foron admitted it, saying it was the first campaign event for the PP in Andalusia. This committee has already become a catch-all. Also this week, there's a lot of noise being made to cover up the shame of the kitchen plot, using state tools to hide their corruption. Or even today, to cover up the spying that was carried out on senators in this chamber. We have seen how it has been received. The testimony from those responsible for managing SEPI stated that the procedures were correct and that the benefit in the form of a loan was in accordance with the law. That's what the oversight authorities did, and that's what they said. And we saw how Mr. Hidalgo testified before the Supreme Court, but that is not enough. Here today, there is also a questioning by the Popular Party under the auspices of this commission. We don't have much more to say. We have seen that with all the trauma caused by COVID-19 for everyone and for all. For everyone, for all, for businesses, for families, for those of us who were left behind. Some people forget to mention that if someone benefited illicitly from something, there was also someone who lived in a luxury penthouse paid for, with commissions from the purchase of masks here in Madrid. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Macias. Now, on behalf of the Popular Parliamentary Group, Senator Miranda de la Arra has the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, it has become very clear today that the bailout of Air Europa was processed at an unusual speed and that it was split into 2 parts. This was done to avoid informing Brussels, something that did not happen in any of the other countries that had bailouts. That you, Mr. Hidalgo, hired as an intermediary for 12,100 euros a month, the same corrupt link involved in all the schemes tainting Sanchismo, and that you talked about it with the same people who are involved in those schemes, and some of them, well, have ended up where they have ended up. Did you involve the wife of the Prime Minister, whom you sponsored through Guacalua, did you meet with her? The same day that Sanchez was discussing the bailout with Abalos and Calvino, and the same day that Spain was mourning its dead. From him and from the first wave at the State Tribute. Did the leak of the press release drafted by Sora and maybe by Laura give them some breathing room? And thanks to them, Abalos enjoyed a vacation. Everything was paid for at a chalet called Chalen in Marbella, where they went, and it was mostly paid in cash. Did you call Begoña at the moment of greatest anxiety or concern? On September 3rd, and just 5 days later, Sanchez wrote to Abalos. It's worth taking another look at it, and they did, because the next day Dama Aldama wrote to his secretary. We finally got the letter from the government and got the funding. We know that SEPI didn't strictly apply the criteria, and at least relaxed the requirement, which was being up to date with tax and social security obligations. And this has led to an investigating court now beginning to look into whether the number 2 at SEPI and this bailout have any irregularities, if all this weren't enough. Today we discovered that in his statement at the National Court, there are things that don't match his statement at the Supreme Court. And that, as we've heard in his own words, he told the National Court that he had never met with Abalos. And to the Supreme Court, after the secretary of Abalos spoke up, he already said yes.
I can answer that question.
Yes.
Please, because you're making an accusation against me. We need to put things in context. I was asked if I had met with Mr. Abalos and Mr. Coldo to discuss the flights, about masks. That's very different from the meetings that took place later, which were only to discuss the loan issue. You just play the clips that you want to play, but of course, you're not accusing me of a crime. It's so that the National Court and the Supreme Court are put in context. I would like you to include and reflect that. I think that's what you should do. That's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hidalgo, and I'm also glad that you wanted to speak.
It's just that he's accusing me of lying in the Senate. No.
No.
Crime of what?
Allegedly put the thing in context. In the A, listening to these audios is what it seems, and that's why I told you allegedly.
Well, the context is very different.
All right, the audios, since they are available to the public, anyone can go online, they can see them. They have been published, for example, by Libertad Digital, yours in the National Court, and anyone can check if the context is what you say or if the context is something else. There's no problem, because there's no trick or deception here. The audios aren't tampered with. It's your voice. You're the one speaking, and you're the one who said it. One thing in the hearing and another thing in the Supreme Court. And everyone is free to interpret.
That's all. I just want to say that.
All right. Today we discovered what I was telling you. And in my opinion, or at least in the opinion of many who might be listening, you changed your mind, which we've become very used to during this term, believe me. What is clear is that it has indeed been published that on September 3rd, at a time when they were going through a situation of great concern, you called the president's wife. You haven't confirmed that yet. If you could, that would be great. You also got the prime minister to take a stand, and he did. Just 5 days after the call, he was giving instructions to Minister Abalos for the president of the government to take a stand, and he did. Minister Abalos listened to you. What a coincidence. On September 8th, they informed you that the funding had been approved. You were splitting 6 million in dividends. And that same day, moreover, you also started to put pressure in another way because you were already satisfied with what had happened. Members, this is the bailout story, with the same Ministry of Transport, which is also involved in other schemes, with the same middleman who is also involved in other schemes, with the same Zapatero who was also doing things in Venezuela, and with the same wife of the president whom you were sponsoring through Guacarua. And the thing is, members of the PSOE, you who boast so much about academic chairs today, it really takes some nerve. You went from rolling out the red carpet and opening the door for Mr. Santos Cerdán to trying to cover everything up and pretending you know nothing about it. But the Spanish people, we do know about it. We know that the corruption of Sanchismo is growing and spreading by the minute. And coincidentally, yesterday marked 2 years since the first questioning before the committee investigating the case. The Coldo case, which started with a man named Coldo and 6 mass contracts. an exemplary party member and night doorman, hired by his former boss, Cerdan. And today, however, we're talking about a mass scheme that implicates 3 ministries in the government of Angel Victor and Armengol. The hydrocarbon scheme with licenses granted by Ritirisa Rivera to the company Villa Fuel, and plastic bags with chistoras being brought into Ferraz. The scheme with the Nices and the Teruel Parador, plus the kickback schemes that began in Navarra with Cerdan. And that spread throughout Spain through Servina Bar. The scheme involving Begonia, financed by Guacalua, which is closely related to university chairs and letters of recommendation that secured 13 million for Carlos Barabes. The scheme involving the brother in performing arts who was hiding in Moncloa to pay taxes in Portugal. The scheme involving the fixer and the dirty war against judges, prosecutors, and UCO investigators. The Plus Ultra scheme with Zapatero at the helm, running through El Pardo, the Forestalia scheme, and of course the one we're in now. The SEPI scheme, in which today we've uncovered and listened to some revealing recordings, at least for me. If you'll allow me some advice, Mr. Hidalgo, step up and speak like you did in this last round, which honestly I thought was very good. Tell the truth, because many people have already come through this room, and at least more than 20 people who have appeared in this room now have open cases. Others were arrested, and I know for a fact that 3 out of the 4 from the Payor have already been to prison. I recommend to the witnesses who are coming, and to you as well, that you tell the truth. Because, as I already told you the first time, you were quick to speak up when it came to asking the Spanish people for 475 million. It's remarkable how silent you get when those Spaniards ask for explanations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda de Lara. Ladies and gentlemen, the session will be suspended for 2 minutes in order to bid farewell to the witness. Immediately after, as agreed by the board and told to the parliamentary group spokespersons, we will proceed accordingly.
One last thing to remind Mr. Solador, that the company has returned 650 million and 150 million in interest to what you call the Spanish people, so that the Spanish people know, which I think is very important. And there is a company called Iberia, which I think you don't know, apparently, because they gave it $1 billion, the most important loan that has been given in 20 days. So, just to remind you that there is a company called Iberia, which is my main competitor. That's all. Huh?
Yes, Mr. Alejo has opened...
Nothing. Just to make it clear that the loan hasn't been repaid because, correct, I understand it's as if the loan hasn't been repaid, but I think it's you.
Has opened...
Now a turn, Mr. Ibegox. I think it's important for the Spanish people to know that they have been repaid.
I'm not going to get into what you said. That's not my job. My job is to make sure you don't leave because, indeed, yes, now the spokesperson you mentioned when you opened the floor has the floor.
By virtue of Article 87 on personal references,
That was tranquilidad.
logically, he was mentioned simply to respond to the witness. If you know of any irregularity regarding any activity that they have financed for any other company, I invite you to bring it to light without any problem. And I also want to thank you for acknowledging in your first statement that you did meet with Mr. Abalos, at least to talk about other matters, or whatever they were. Yes.
Yes, no. Perfectly. I think it was legitimate for Iberia to receive its loan in 20 days, like almost all airlines did within 2 months. We were the last ones, but, well, just to finish.
Yes, Madam President, I suppose that by opening a well, by answering the no, a right of reply. No. For Ms. Marcos, we continue. Mr. Binando has not requested the floor on grounds of personal reference. You have opened a turn to dismiss the witness immediately. I ask, please, that it is not allowed. As a right of reply, that's it. Immediately afterwards, as agreed by the board and communicated to the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups, we will proceed, and so this committee agrees, to debate and vote on the proposals to expand the work plan that have been submitted and admitted for consideration by the Committee Bureau. The session is suspended.